5 years ago yesterday, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. Later that day, President Trump banned travelers from Europe, the NBA season was canceled, and the great COVID lockdown was about to begin. Today, we look and listen back to what those first days of COVID felt like here in the North Country. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com. And the Devlin Inn and Suites, Lake Placid, welcoming families, athletes, and groups to the Olympic Village, offering Adirondack mountain views and dog-friendly accommodations. TheDevlinNY.com.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Wednesday, March 12th. First up, President Donald Trump's border czar made a stop in Albany today. Tom Homan lambasted state Democrats' immigration policies and threw his support behind a bill that would erode New York's sanctuary city policies. Jung-Yoon Han with the New York Public News Network reports.
Homan, who's from the North Country, took special aim at New York's green light law, which lets undocumented immigrants obtain driver's licenses. The law also blocks the Department of Homeland Security from accessing state DMV records. He says the law is one way that cities in New York have been able to enforce sanctuary policies, which he says are dangerous.
No one should be pushing back on removing public safety threats from their communities.
That's why he's supporting state Republicans' efforts to pass Lakin's Law, which would require local officials to notify federal agents when someone who's undocumented gets arrested. At the same press conference, Homan couldn't answer what Columbia University graduate student and pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil was arrested for when asked by the New York Public News Network.
I'm familiar with this exact charge. I can just tell you what my discussions have been with it. Is that it's a direct violation of our foreign policy objectives.
Trump officials have not shown evidence to corroborate this claim. In Albany, I'm Jung-Yoon Han for the New York Public News Network.
So I spent some time this week going through our archive from the week of March 11th, 2020, the day the COVID pandemic officially started. And this morning on Northern Light, I talked with the co-hosts, Monica Sandreski and Catherine Wheeler, about what was happening that day in the North Country. On that day, there were no official COVID cases in the 12 counties we call the North Country yet. The closest were in Saratoga County. You might remember that there was a cluster connected to a CVS drugstore in Saratoga Springs, and that was kind of the closest it got. But we knew that something was imminent. You know, there were hundreds of cases had already broken out in New Rochelle in Westchester County downstate, and then cases spread quickly into New York City, which was really the worst of the COVID pandemic in those early days and weeks. And I was listening back to all of our reporting here in the North Country, and it's fascinating to hear how we didn't even know what was about to hit us. You know, I remember I was supposed to hold an event with, a private event at a bar here in Canton that Thursday night, the day after the global pandemic was announced. And we were kind of waffling. We're like, should we hold it? Should we not hold it? We didn't. It's a good thing we didn't hold it. But, we were all in this entirely strange territory that we didn't even understand.
And so when did daily life start to change?
So that first official day of the pandemic, SUNY announced that it was sending all students home and would go remote the next week. And I think that's when things really started to get real for a lot of people. I was looking through our archive and I found this story by Emily Russell. We sent her out to talk with people at SUNY Plattsburgh the day that news broke. And you can just hear how shell-shocked everyone was. Let's hear the beginning of the story.
I got to campus about an hour after the news broke yesterday. It was sort of chaos. Most kids were on their phones more than usual. They were making plans for where they would finish up the semester. I found Hannah Cunningham sitting on a couch in the student center with her friends. Tell me how you're feeling right now.
I'm stressed.
Cunningham is a senior at SUNY Plattsburgh. This is her last college semester.
I had a whole 8 weeks left and it's gone. That's crazy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so that definitely took away from my senior year for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear that disbelief and, heartbreak. Like her whole the rest of the end of her senior year are gone.
Totally, which we heard from countless high school students, too.
Right.
I remember so much of that coverage. And, well, at the time, Andrew Cuomo was governor, and I'm sure he was asked about this monumental decision to close all SUNY schools, too. What did he have to say about it?
Yeah, his response, too, really belies just how little we understood about what was about to happen. He described it as a precaution, but something that wouldn't lead to widespread closures elsewhere.
And look, you don't want to shut down society, right? Because that's massively disruptive to the economy, to life, etc. But your main concern here is the public health crisis.
Of course, in short order, we would be shutting down society. And in fact, just the next day, Cuomo banned gatherings of 500 or more. It went down to 150 or more, 100 more, whatever it was. And then, until we were all at home and, anything more than 6 people and we were all finding pods to hang out with and stuff like that. The day after that SUNY announcement, a Friday, parents were told that public schools would be closed starting Monday for an unspecified time, and that ended up being the whole rest of the year. I remember as a parent, I was thinking, my kid's going to go back to school in a couple of weeks. The first confirmed COVID cases were reported in the North Country that weekend, and by the next week, there were cases in every county. The border with Canada closed that next week. The governor told everyone to stay home, and the lockdown really started to descend and take effect.
Okay, so I wasn't here at NCPR yet. I wasn't even in New York State. I was living in Wyoming. And so to both of you, how did things change here at NCPR?
Well, at the station itself, all the staff, just took their stuff and went home. I feel like we kind of joked at the time that it kind of looked like a disaster zone around here.
It was like Blade Runner. It was like a post-apocalyptic,
yes. Papers. Yes, but Todd Moe and I, now retired, we're really the only ones at the station, to host the show, to host Northern Light every morning. And we just made sure to mask and disinfect the studios. We were never in the same room, just really talking with each other through the talkback function through the studios, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and meanwhile, for the reporters at home, we had to make sure reporters had laptops. Not all the reporters had laptops; they just had their desktop at work. So we set up a Slack channel so that we could communicate for the first time. We had already been using Zoom because we had reporters in the Adirondacks and in Plattsburgh. We were using that every morning, but now we were using that every day to communicate at all. And we set up all these spreadsheets, and this was kind of a really macabre and kind of painful part of it for us as reporters. These spreadsheets of the number of confirmed cases in each county, the number of deaths in each county. We started reporting about the scramble for respirators, about hospitals running short of rooms, people running around trying to desperately find a COVID test to figure out whether they were positive or not. Remember all that? So, I guess looking back, I think that this changed so much about how we operate today here at NCPR. On a positive note, I think it made us more breaking news savvy, and it really strengthened our muscles in our quick ability to pivot to emergency news, better able to report on big, complicated stories. That was me talking this morning on Northern Light with Monica and Catherine. We'd love to hear how the COVID pandemic changed you or your family, what you do, how you live your life, how you see the future. Send a text with the word COVID to 315-978-6264. 315-978-6277. Again, text the word COVID to 315-978-6277 with your thoughts on how COVID has changed you 5 years later. Thanks so much for helping to shape our reporting. Music today by Evan Veenstra of Gananoque, Ontario, and Michael Hart and Ramon Vasquez of Malone. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.